June 28th, 1944. Camp Hearn, Texas. The transport train shuddered to a stop in heat, so thick you could taste the dust. Emma Richter stood in the cattle car doorway, wrists rubbed raw from 3 weeks of steel. The chains connecting her to 3 other women clinked with each breath. She'd crossed an ocean expecting brutality. Everything the Reich had told her about Americans, the savagery, the cruelty, the hatred, was about to be confirmed. Then a weathered rancher named Jack Morrison approached carrying bolt cutters. He looked at the chains with an expression Emma couldn't decode. Not anger, exactly. Something deeper. He spoke through an interpreter 5 words that made every woman freeze. "You won't need these here." The chains hit the concrete with a sound like breaking glass. Before we go further, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This channel uncovers World War II moments that history forgot to record. Drop a like if you value untold stories, and comment where you're watching from. These voices from the past deserve to be heard. Now, back to that scorching Texas morning when everything changed. Emma stared at her freed wrists, at the red grooves carved into pale skin, at hands that could suddenly move independently. For 3 weeks she'd been inventory, property, cargo marked dangerous. Now a stranger with calloused hands and sun-beaten face was telling her she was something else. She looked up at Morrison's weathered features, searching for the trap, for the cruelty that must be coming. But his eyes held only a rancher's practical assessment, the same look he'd give a horse or a fence line. Not hatred, not contempt, just acknowledgement that chains had no place in the work ahead. And in that moment, standing in the brutal Texas sun with the weight gone from her wrists, Emma Richter realized that everything she'd been told about her enemy might be a lie. Camp Hearn sprawled across Bell County like a temporary city carved from raw lumber and barbed wire. By mid-1944, nearly 4,000 prisoners occupied its dusty streets. Most were Afrika Korps soldiers, Rommel's desert veterans captured in Tunisia, now confined to American soil thousands of miles from any battlefield they'd imagined. But one barracks held an anomaly. Approximately 100 German women radio operators, Luftwaffe auxiliaries, nurses gathered from holding facilities across the eastern United States. The Army called it administrative efficiency. The women called it terrifying. They'd arrived expecting systematic brutality. Nazi propaganda had been explicit and consistent. Americans tortured prisoners, starved them, worked them until they collapsed. The Atlantic crossing reinforced every fear: cramped holds, minimal rations, armed guards who treated them like unexploded ordnance. Then came the chains. 4 women linked at the wrists, a security measure that turned every basic human function into a humiliating group exercise. Emma learned to eat left-handed because Rosa was tethered to her right, learned to sleep sitting upright when Hilda had nightmares. The metal wore grooves that throbbed constantly. After the first week, you stopped noticing. The chains became background noise, like the rattle of train wheels or the distant sound of male prisoners singing in adjacent barracks. Processing day arrived with bureaucratic efficiency. Photographs, fingerprints, numbers assigned like warehouse inventory. They received donated civilian dresses, faded cotton sundresses that hung loose on frames hollowed by weeks of inadequate food. American women were built differently, apparently taller, but dresses made them look like children playing dress-up, like girls who'd raided their mother's closets. Through it all, through every station and inspection, the chains remained, until Jack Morrison walked into the administrative building. He was 59 years old, weathered like old boot leather, wearing working rancher clothes and boots caked with red Texas clay. He owned 5,000 acres of rolling pasture southwest of camp. The war had stripped his ranch of labor young men, shipped to Europe or pulled into defense plants. His cattle needed tending. His fences were collapsing. The labor shortage across rural Texas had become desperate. Morrison stood looking at 12 chained women with an expression that made the camp commandant shift uncomfortably. Beside him stood Wilhelm Fischer, a German-American from Fredericksburg hired as interpreter. Morrison spoke in slow, deliberate drawl. Fischer translated carefully. "Mr. Morrison wants to know why they're still chained." The commandant's answer was immediate and rehearsed. Security protocol. Enemy military personnel. Potentially dangerous. Standard procedures for prisoner work details. Morrison's response came harder, delivered in a tone that left no negotiation space. Fischer hesitated before translating, choosing words carefully. "Mr. Morrison says chains are dangerous around livestock. Could catch on equipment. Could injure workers and cattle. He says he won't take them chained." The rancher crossed his arms, waiting. "He says if they're too dangerous to unchain, they're too dangerous for ranch work. He'll find other labor." Silence filled the room like something physical. The commandant had heard this argument before from civilian contractors. The labor shortage gave them leverage that military protocol couldn't override. Morrison clearly wasn't bluffing. His expression said he'd walk out and let his fences rot before he'd work chained prisoners like animals. The commandant made his calculation. He needed Morrison's cooperation more than Morrison needed prison labor. "Remove the chains." A guard approached with keys. The metallic click of locks opening sounded impossibly loud in the small office. The mechanism connecting Emma to Hilda released. Then Rosa, then Hannelore. The chains fell away, hitting concrete with that strange, thunderous quiet of something heavy suddenly gone. Emma stared at her wrists. The grooves remained, red and angry against pale skin, but the weight was gone. She lifted her arms experimentally, feeling joints move independently for the first time in weeks. The freedom felt strange, terrifying almost, like something that could be revoked the moment she trusted it. Morrison stepped forward, looking each woman directly in the eyes, not through them, not past them, but at them, acknowledging their presence as individuals. Fischer translated his words with a voice that wavered slightly. "You'll work hard. We'll treat you fair. You need something. You tell the foreman. You have problems. You report them. That's the deal." Morrison paused, his weathered face serious. "And you won't need chains here. Not on my ranch. Your people first. Prisoners second." Fischer's voice cracked, translating that final phrase. People first, prisoners second. The words hung in the hot Texas air, like something impossible, like a concept that couldn't exist in the world Emma knew. That night, lying in her bunk, Emma couldn't sleep. Her wrists felt naked. Wrong. She kept expecting guards to burst through the door, to reattach the chains, to explain that Morrison's kindness had been some kind of elaborate test that she'd somehow failed. But morning came quietly. No chains. No brutality. Just sunlight through dusty windows, and the knowledge that today she'd ride unchained to Morrison Ranch. Monday arrived hot and bright. 12 German women climbed into a military transport truck at dawn. No chains binding them together. Just 2 bored guards with rifles who looked like they'd rather be sleeping. The truck rumbled southwest through landscape that seemed impossibly flat after Germany's forests and mountains. Endless sky. Scattered cattle looking like toys in the distance. Barbed wire running to horizons. 12 miles later, Morrison Ranch appeared 5,000 acres of rolling pasture, windmills turning slowly against cloudless blue, pumping water from depths Emma couldn't imagine. The main house was white-clapboard with a wide porch, surrounded by ancient live oaks that must have been old when Texas was still Mexico. Barns and corrals clustered nearby, wood silvered by decades of sun and wind. Morrison met them in the yard. Beside him stood Tom Rawlings, his foreman, a lean man in his 50s with eyes that assessed capability without judgment. Several ranch hands stood watching, older men and teenage boys. Everyone of working age had gone to war. Through Fisher, Morrison explained the work. Some women would tend the massive vegetable garden that fed the ranch household. Others would handle livestock feeding, watering, general maintenance. Still others would repair fences, the never-ending task on a spread this size. Emma was assigned to livestock work with 5 others. They received work gloves, heavy leather, worn but functional, too large for women's hands, but serviceable. Morrison demonstrated how to pitch hay into feeding troughs, how to pump water into metal tanks, how to move around cattle without startling them into panic. Then they began. The work was brutal. Radio operation required mental focus, but not muscle. This was different. Lifting hay bales that weighed more than combat packs. Hauling water buckets that sloshed and spilled. Walking miles across open pasture, checking fence lines under sun that felt like physical weight. By mid-morning, Emma's back ached. By noon, her hands were blistered despite the gloves. By afternoon, muscles she'd forgotten existed screamed protest. But she wasn't chained. That awareness returned constantly, surprising her each time. Her hands moved independently. Her arms swung freely. She could walk away from Rosa and Hilda without that perpetual mental tug. The freedom felt fragile, like something that would shatter if she acknowledged it too directly. At noon, Morrison's wife appeared. Sarah Morrison was 60, practical and kind in that no-nonsense way farm women develop. She brought lunch on wooden trays, thick sandwiches with actual meat, fresh fruit that must have come from the garden, a large pitcher of lemonade beaded with condensation. The women ate in the shade of a massive live oak. The guard sat nearby but didn't hover, didn't watch every bite, didn't make them feel like animals being monitored during feeding. Mrs. Morrison served the food with small gestures that conveyed respect Emma hadn't experienced in months. She placed plates in hands rather than dropping them on the ground. She made sure everyone had enough, asking through gestures if anyone wanted more. When the first pitcher emptied, she brought another without waiting to be asked. The lemonade was revelation, cold, sweet and tart simultaneously. Shocking after weeks of tepid water and bitter ersatz coffee. Emma drank slowly, trying to memorize this taste, this sensation. It felt like kindness made liquid, like proof the world still contained sweetness, even for prisoners wearing donated dresses and working enemy ranches. Rosa spoke quietly in German, her voice barely audible. "This is strange." Hilda asked what she meant. though they all knew. All of it, Rosa said. The work, the food, the way they treat us. She paused, searching for words. Like people. The afternoon brought different challenges. Tom Rawlings showed them fence repair, how to stretch barbed wire tight, how to hammer staples into wooden posts without splitting the wood, how to judge when a post needed replacing versus reinforcing. Tom spoke little, but his instructions were clear and patient. He didn't care that they were German, didn't care about politics or ideology or which side of the war they'd supported. He cared whether they worked honestly and learned quickly. By those measures he seemed satisfied. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that looked impossible, the women loaded back into the truck, exhausted, sore, hands blistered and backs aching. But something had shifted in that first day. They had worked honest labor, had been treated fairly, had drunk cold lemonade under Texas sky, had been called by their names instead of their numbers. The chains were gone, and the world hadn't ended. 3 weeks into the routine, Morrison had a problem. A cow had died giving birth, leaving behind a calf that wouldn't survive without intervention. Weak-legged, huge-eyed, too fragile to stand. Without its mother, it would die within days, unless someone bottle-fed it every few hours. Morrison walked into the barn where Emma was stacking hay bales. Through Fisher, he explained the situation. The ranch needed someone to take responsibility for the orphan. He was asking for a volunteer. Emma's hand went up before she'd consciously decided. Morrison nodded, gestured for her to follow. The calf lay in fresh straw, its chest rising and falling with labored breaths. Morrison showed her the process, how to mix the formula with precise measurements, how to fill the oversized bottle, how to hold it at the correct angle, how to be patient while the calf learned to accept this strange rubber substitute for its mother. They're stubborn at first, Morrison said through Fisher, but once they learn, they'll remember you. You'll be its mother now. Emma knelt in the straw. The calf smelled like hay and warmth, and something indefinably alive. She touched its neck gently, feeling the rapid heartbeat beneath soft hide, then guided the bottle toward its mouth. The calf resisted initially, turning its head, confused by this unfamiliar thing. Emma persisted, murmuring soft German words she didn't realize she was speaking. Lullabies her own mother had sung. Nonsense phrases that meant nothing and everything. Then the calf latched on. It drank desperately, milk disappearing from the bottle in urgent gulps, its small tail twitching with satisfaction. Something cracked open in Emma's chest. Not broke, but opened. She had never been maternal, had never particularly liked children or animals, had never imagined herself as a caretaker, but this calf needed her. Its survival depended on her patience, her attention, her willingness to return every few hours with a bottle and soft words. And the calf didn't care that she was German, didn't care about war or uniforms or enemy status. It just knew she brought food and warmth and safety. When the bottle emptied, the calf looked at Emma with pure trust. Morrison watched from the barn door, his expression softening. "That calf won't forget you," he said. "You're its person now." Emma fed it 4 times a day for 2 weeks, watching it grow strong, stand, then run clumsily with the joy of new life. Each feeding felt like proof she could create something instead of serving systems built for death. One October morning, Morrison asked through Fisher if she'd ever ridden a horse. She hadn't. "Want to learn?" she did. He put her on an old Maori named Patience and taught her balance, reins, and communication through weight instead of force. The first ride terrified her, the height, the power, but Patience was forgiving, and Emma was determined. Soon she could walk, then trot, then help move small groups of cattle. Emma Richter, former Berlin radio operator, was becoming a cowgirl in Texas. She learned the ranch completely: pastures, water sources, fences, weather, and livestock temperaments. Her body changed: stronger muscles, calloused hands, sun-darkened skin. Work that once would have crushed her now felt natural. Tom Rawlings noticed. "You got a feel for this," he said. "Most city folks don't." "Berlin is very different," Emma replied. Tom nodded. "War drops people in strange places. Sometimes they belong there more than home." By September 1944, 20 German women worked the ranch. The cattle thrived, fences held, gardens overflowed. Emma was indispensable riding, feeding calves, repairing windmills. Her English neared fluency. The chains marks had faded from her wrists. Then the news spread. Germany was losing. The war would end. They would be sent home to whatever waited. Morrison gathered all 20 German women in the barn on a Saturday afternoon in late September. The air smelled of hay and leather and horses. Golden light slanted through gaps in the weathered wood. Fisher stood ready to translate. Morrison removed his hat, held it in weathered hands, looked at each woman in turn. Then he spoke, slowly and deliberately. "You folks have worked here for months now. Good, honest work." He nodded toward Emma. "Some of you have become genuinely skilled at ranch tasks most city people never learn." Fisher translated carefully, preserving tone and meaning. Morrison spoke carefully. When they had arrived, chained, frightened, worn down, he hadn't known if it would work. He hadn't known if prisoners could be trusted without fear, or if Germans would take direction from Americans. "But you proved something," he said, "that people are people no matter the side of a war. Given respect and honest work, most respond in kind. Chains aren't necessary. Decency is." The women listened in silence. Some understood without translation. Morrison went on. The war would end. They would go home to hardship, destruction, years of rebuilding. "But remember this," he said, meeting their eyes. "You're not prisoners first, not Germans first. You're people first. With dignity no war can erase." He gestured to Emma. "You became a cowgirl in Texas. You adapted. You learned hard things. You proved yourself." Several women wiped their eyes. Morrison handed each of them worn work gloves and a handwritten note. Emma's included an extra line. "You're welcome back. A cowgirl always has a place here." May 8, 1945. Germany surrendered. The announcement felt distant. Emma was still a prisoner, still tending cattle on Morrison Ranch. Gradually came paperwork, trains, repatriation. She left in August without chains. Hamburg was rubble. Berlin worse. Emma's apartment building was gone. Her parents had died in February, buried in a mass grave. At 24, she was alone. But she carried Texas with her, the ranch, the lesson that dignity wasn't tied to uniforms. She cleared rubble, rebuilt streets, worked with hands made strong by ranch labor. In October, she found Hilda in a bread line. They embraced like sisters. Years later, Morrison wrote, Emma replied, thanking him for removing chains, for treating prisoners like people. His answer was brief. Wasn't generosity. was decency. Emma kept the letters, the gloves, and a photograph of herself on horseback. When asked about the war, she spoke of chains falling, of trust learned, of a rancher who proved enemies were people first. The chains hit concrete in June 1944. Metal on stone. Weight released. A simple sound that changed everything.